No man is an island. I didn't do this on my own. I want to talk about joint ventures. I want to talk about the power of joint ventures, some of the problems that they can cause, but equally some of the problems they can solve, which is the bigger thing. There's many types of joint ventures, and I'm going to focus particularly on kind of the cash side of it tonight. So if you're low on capital, if you need more capital, because we all run out at some point, I want to focus on that. But you can joint venture on all sorts of things. Our man Joe spoke about experience. One of the big advantages of bringing on David is experience. You can bring on anyone you want on a joint venture. Whatever you're missing, you can joint venture on. We're doing a joint venture with Talani on planning. It's useful. We've got another architect who's nuts admittedly, but he's funding all of the planning costs. And if it doesn't go through, we don't have to pay all of it back because he's confident he's going to get planning. You can joint venture on whatever the hell you want. There are no fixed terms. In fact, that's a joint venture contract when you start out. It's bang. You fill it all in. You put whatever the hell you want in, any clause you want. Joint ventures aren't just for capital. It's what I'm going to focus on because what most of you are probably going to want to use. But you can use it for experience. You can joint venture with your builders, with your landowners. They put a piece of land in. They say you build it out. You go get development finance or another form of finance or use your own money. And then you come back. You don't have to buy the land. You build it out. You give them his cut at the end, maybe with some percentage uplift. Nice and easy. It saves you having to buy it. It saves you take on the risk and the time of buying it. Developments are not overnight projects. You know, don't think you're going to do one in a year. Most of them are 18 months to 2.5 years, kind of thing like that. They take time, and that's okay. But you can joint venture experience. You can joint venture for your contractors. Builders get stuff at cost. So you can reduce your build costs, lower your margins, increase the loan to values for the likes of your banks, get better rates. You know, you can joint venture on anything that you want. Like I said, planning costs, all of your professional teams. Capital. Capital's the main one. And this is kind of my role within AWT. I deal with investors, I deal with site acquisition, I deal with exit. We did £3 million in private finance last year. That's individuals coming to us and saying, hey, I've got some money, I want to do a deal, help me out. And funny enough, over the last 3-4 months, most of it have been people like yourselves who have struggled to find sites, who have got money, they're desperate to do something, but they're going, it's been 6 to 9 months and I haven't found a site yet. All the vendors want too much and I got money sat in the bank. I'm losing money every year. Inflation, monetary debasement, like crazy stats. Monetary debasement is 18% on average per year over the last 10 years. If you're not cleaning 20% profit, you're barely making a margin. You can't leave your money in your bank anymore. People are realizing this. Joe touched on it with bridging finance. All the new bridging lenders are predominantly high net worth individuals, a lot of them based out in the Middle East and the Far East, going, sat on a few mil, don't want to buy property in the Dubai market right now, it's not very good. Let's open up a bridging fund. Let's open up a short-term fund where I can make 12, 14, 16, 20% per annum on my cap. Why not? Or even just 8 to 10%, to be honest, for a lot of people is great. A lot of money from like South Africa and places like that as well, where currencies aren't doing what they need to be. So capital, for me, is the main thing that we look to JV on all the time. And I'm going to give you an example tonight of a deal that we did recently about how you can joint venture on your projects. Would that be of interest to you guys? Yeah. So, headline figures on the deal. I'm not going to go into the details of how and why it all stacks. We'll get into that another time. Purchase price is a nice round 675K. We're building 31 units in total, 28 resi, 3 commercial. I know I said I don't do commercial, but every now and again we touch it. We're looking at around about 3.5 mil build cost. I'm going to keep this with round figures rather than go into the pennies for tonight. And you're looking at around about 550K on professional fees. So immediately you're looking at that and going, okay, that's like 4.7 mil cost. How many of you got 4.7 mil in your bank right now? I've got to ask. Someone might say yes, you know. I'll be having a conversation with you after if you do. So you think, how am I going to get into that? Now, Joe's already touched on the financing side of this. Joe, if you were looking at that, someone came to you with that deal, it's got full planning. You're looking at that, GDC is around 4.7. What was typical from a bank? 6.35 mil is your GDV.
Okay, so as long as they will lend the lower of the two, either 65% of GDV or 80% of total costs, if you're talking about standard mainstream development lenders.
Love that, thank you. Now, if you get a bit creative, Joe, I presume you're familiar with mezz lending? Yeah, so we got some of that as well. Topped it up. I'm going to make it nice and easy for you, but basically, we needed 500 grand. And all that was going towards the purchase price. So I'm going, right, I need 500 grand to get into this. The bank will pay for the rest. Obviously, this is going to come from sales at the back end, nice and easy. Let's just assume the deal works. Yeah. And you're thinking, how am I going to get my 500K? You notice when I started out, I went straight to development finance. I went to my senior debt providers. Why would I do that? Well, number one, they're relatively cheap compared to private individuals. You're speaking to someone for the final amount of money. They're going to know you want that final amount of money. They're going to ask you for a percentage of the profit or a high interest rate to compare it to. In my mind, development finance, bridging finance is pretty cheap because the alternative is using my own money, which means I can't do the deal. So even if I'm taking a huge hit on it, I said I'd rather take a percentage of something than 100% of nothing. So I don't care if it's 30% per annum. I'll pay it if I'm getting paid out the deal. As long as it works, I'm happy. Otherwise, I get nothing. As I say, you make quite a lot of money on this. This does about 1.3 mil less finance costs on profit. So there's a lot of money to go around, a lot of profit that can be paid out. So you need $500,000 to get into it, and you're thinking, okay, where am I going to get this $500,000 from? I've already got my senior debt. I know I can get that through. I've got an expert broker like Joe, and I'm thinking, yeah, let's do this deal. I need $500,000, but I don't have it myself. Or maybe you do, but you don't want to use it. A lot of people are a fan of leverage. I go, right, I'm going to put this in front of an investor, someone with a bit of money, and it could be multiple people as well. And then one tip I'm going to leave you with tonight, and I'd really love for you all to go away and do this, is start ringing through your existing phone book. I'm genuinely yet to find anybody who doesn't have an investor in their phone right now. Someone you can ring up, have a conversation with, pitch a deal to, who will do a deal with you. They may only have $5,000, but hey, you're $5,000 closer than you were a few minutes ago. But you'd be surprised how much money people are sat on. I had an investor a few months back, just before Christmas, who wanted to do a deal, straight didn't have enough money for it, and I said, well, start ringing people, find out what you've got. His next door neighbor sat on 1.2 mil. Gave him $200,000 in the space of 3 hours on a loan agreement. First charges, all that kind of side of stuff. It's a perfectly legit deal. You don't know who you've got until you start having a conversation with people. People sit on money all the time. This is England. No one tells you how much money they make. Do it in America, you walk down the street, they'll just tell you. Not in the UK. You can't talk about money, it's not allowed. So start finding people, start having conversations, and the more that you start networking with people, the more conversations you have, the more you realize that actually, yeah, this works, this is possible. The same way I had this realization back in September and then again in March of 2018, 2019, this is doable. It happens, it's real. I know there's people in this room today that have done loan agreements and joint ventures, as you saw people put their hands up. They work really, really well, and everyone's really happy. For those of you who've done joint ventures, how many of you were the person lending the money? Okay, cool. Were you happy with how it panned out at the end? Yeah? See, it works for them. They're happy. You're not just, yeah, you're getting a deal for free, happy days, but they're also happy because they're making money too, because their money's not sat in the bank. So we put this deal out and said, hey, who wants to invest in this? We gave them headline figures, something similar to this, plus a little bit more information. So when you're pitching a deal, always remember who's on the other side and remember what's in it for them. You're not asking for $500,000 to make you happy. No one's going to give you money if that's what you're telling them. Oh, what'd you get in return? Well, you make me happy. What a great return on $500,000. Come on, think about it. You laugh with the first time I've seen someone put a deal out without mentioning what the profit is. Or someone trying to sell an HMO without the purchase price. Serious. First thing I'd do is just think through your deal, think about it sensibly and logically, and you're going to put yourself in the top 10% of people who are pitching deals straight away. But the biggest thing investors want to know about is your exit. Never forget about your exit. How are you getting out? What is their security? How are they getting paid? How much are they getting paid? When are they getting paid? This is basically all an investor ever cares about, pretty much. They don't want to know about you, sure, and they want to know about your experience. But without this, nothing's happening. Exit is the single most important thing you can do. And just break it down. What is the exit? Okay, cool. So on this deal, 6.35 mil, there's 31 units. We're going to sell them. How are we going to sell them? Step one, off-plan sales. So we're going to list them. You go through your marketing strategy. After about 6-9 months away through the build, we'll get our first CGIs on the market. 6 months later, so about 3 to 6 months before the end of the build, we're going to have our first show home on. There's going to be agents showing them around. There's going to be roast chicken in the oven, so they walk in and go, oh, it smells good. And they can picture themselves living there. Remember, you're not selling these units to investors, you're selling these people to home buyers. First-time buyers usually as well. They're the people you're fighting with, trying to get your flips, by the way, who watched Homes of the Hammer or Grand Designs once and thought they can do a doer-upper, buy it, live in it, and do it up. It's right if you know what you're doing, but these are the people you're competing with who don't care about profit margin. So you can sell these units to them. So yeah, you do your little open house viewing, you show everyone around, you've got to show home, people start putting offers in. That's your off-plan sales. You're selling stuff before you finish buying it. How else are you going to sell it? Well, I mentioned not a lot of investors. You could have a lot of investors. We do a lot of people out in the Far East. Their single most favorite thing to buy is an apartment in a city center with a guaranteed yield for 8 to 10%, or maybe 6 to 8% for some of them. And they buy cash. They are the best buyers you could hope for. They take 2-3 weeks to decide, then when they're ready, they just go and buy it. About 15 to 20% of our units we assume are going to sell to people like that. And as I say, we've got connections to people out there. There are entire agencies who just group all these people together, like 10, 15, 20,000 investors based out in Singapore. By the way, you can't talk about investment in Singapore unless you have more than $1 million in your bank. Seriously. So a lot of these people are very, very, very wealthy. They're not going to get lending anyway. They're happy with 6%. Singapore, average investment returns 2%. It's an absolute killing for them. So yeah, we pitch deals out to them. That's the second way we're going to get out. Third way we're going to get out, standard open market sales. Once everything's finished, we put it on the market. We have 2 or 3 agents who are going to put it through. At this point, whoever takes it, takes it. We just want to sell them. We won't drop more than 5% on any given unit, but we know they're fair valued and they may even get valued up even more. And your final exit is if for whatever reason they don't sell, you refinance it, return the capital to your investor, because you should have at least a 25% profit margin in most of these deals. Turn the capital to the investor, maybe with some profit, and then you rent it out and sell it as an ongoing concern afterwards. How are you getting out? 4 different exits on this site. A lot of your sites are going to be the same. There may be different ways you can get out. You might get out before you've got planning. You might get out after you've got planning. You might get out partway through the build. There's loads of different ways of getting out. Some people might buy the entire block to use for social housing, things like that. There's a number of different ways. Just have a think about it. How are you going to get out? And when you start pitching a deal to an investor, you suddenly realize where the faults are in your deal, but also why it's really good. And I find this really, really helpful. And Joe mentioned, don't hate about the banks and just respect the fact that they're trying to mitigate their risk. If a bank lends you money, they've signed off on the deal. That's another person, usually an experienced person or team that's gone through the deal and said, yeah, you know what, we'll put our money in this. It's really reassuring when you get someone who says yes, even if it is a bank. So think about, again, your exit. Then you think about when are you going to get paid? Joe mentioned, again, 12 to 18 months. You can pay it back early. You never get a bridging loan for 6 months. If your refurb is 6 months, you get it for 9 or 12. If you're pitching to an investor, this is a 2-year build. I'm going to say your money's in for 2.5, maybe even 3. Throw extra time in. How many of you would complain if I turned around and said, right, it's a 3-year deal, then 18 months later, you get all your money back plus the same profit? No one's going to complain. What if it's the other way around? Then you don't look very clever. You've got egg on your face. Just build in extra time. Honestly, just build in extra time. Build in extra contingency, especially when you're pitching. It's going to save your relationship and it's going to save your reputation for the years to come. You build a bad reputation with the banks, someone will still lend to you. You build a bad reputation with individuals, they'll never give you money ever again. People remember. Institutions, they can afford to take a risk. Individuals won't. Not when it's their life savings as well. 80% of my investors are first-time developers or first-time investors. They have no idea what contract administration is. And I've got to explain that to them in the first place. If you break that relationship, you break that trust, you're just not going to be able to do another deal again. So build in extra time. Give yourself room to cock up, especially if it's your first deal, because trust me, no deal's perfect. You'll hit a speed bump along the way, guaranteed. So yeah, think about your exit, what and when. Obviously how as well. In terms of how you would structure these, very, very simply, agree something in principle. Just trust me, it can be done. Then get your tax advisor, your solicitor and your investor all in the same room and just say, make that legal. Done, nice and simple. I'll come back to your questions at the end, my man, don't you worry. There's basically 2 different ways in which you can finance something like this. We use an equity share. Basically means they put the 500K in that we need and we gave them half the profit on the back end. I say it's about 1.3 less finance, comes in around 900 grand net profit. So they're putting in 500K, they're making 450K profit because we went 50-50. It took them 2 years. So they're making about 45% per annum return. Now that's a lot to be paying out. How many of you would be happy with a 45% per annum return? It's not even the highest one I've done. I love that. Our castle did 98, but those investors came in really early, to be fair. A little bit more risk involved. Or the alternative, I mentioned this earlier, is loan agreements. And traditionally this comes with security. And let's say these guys gave us 500K. I mentioned it's going to take 2.5 years. Let's call it 4. So maybe 500K, 4 years at 20% per annum. 20% is fairly reasonable. Most industry standards anywhere from sort of 8 to 20, 25. Depends on who you are. It depends what security you offer. If we did it this way, we couldn't offer them a charge on this because we've got senior debt. But we could offer them a charge different property, we'd offer some personal guarantees. And you can also offer, if any of you are familiar with markets, you could offer an equivalent of a swap. So some shares in different projects in the event that this one didn't complete the way it needed to. Plenty of different ways. You can get creative with that. You can use your own home as collateral. You can use a classic car, art, gold. It doesn't have to be property. You got to get creative with this. What can you offer in return? Now, I don't have any art or gold or anything like that to offer up, so I've never done it, but I happen to know it's possible. Yet. Yeah, watches, actually. I do know one of my clients is a watch dealer. He offers up his watches in his store as collateral for some of the loans that he borrows. That's quite cool. So there's a number of different ways in which you can do it. Get creative with it. And some of the simplest joint ventures are with vendors. The uses of purchase options, lockout agreements, subject to planning offers, All this stuff is a great way of mitigating your risk at different stages of the process. We bought this site with full planning, so no real concern for us there. But hey, your site might not have planning. You may have to look at a site without planning in the current market. With the margins the way they are, you're going to want to take on a little bit more risk if you want to find some of those sites with better margins in them. But again, if you're pitching to investors, you're going to have to start breaking down timeframes for them. Because if you're going through a site with planning, I wouldn't have paid 700 grand for this site if it didn't have planning, even if it was worth it. It's too much money outlaid on day one for the risk that I'm going to get on the back end. It's just not worth it. So I'd have agreed some form of delayed exchange sort of deal. The one we're doing with Talani, we've got 9 months to get planning through. How long will planning take? 4, 5, 6 months?
2-3 months.
2-3 months. And we'd agreed a 9-month option instead of about building in extra time. It's the same is true on every single deal that you do because you're going to have delays. So we've got to pay about 50K, give or take, in cost to get planning through. So my first one is, right, I need 50 grand. Then I've got to buy the site later on, which I think is 750K off the top of my head, or 770K off the top of my head. I don't need all that money now. Like, I can get my planning costs now, and then 6-9 months later, I can pitch investors again, but this time with a lower rate because there's less risk on the table. The first one was a 50K. Now I'm pitching something for 700 grand. But the difference now as well is I'm pitching something with planning. It's got something tangible. I can now get hard build costs because I can get my construction drawings done. Before planning, you don't know what your house types are going to be. No idea how many units you're going to get on. So it's very hard to pitch stuff when it's all kind of up in the air, especially with newbie investors who have no idea how to put a deal together. You've got to break it down for them in simple terms. How does it all work? So joint ventures for us are an awesome way of doing it. Some of the problems I've had, time is the biggest issue we've had in terms of making this happen. We probably do 7,000 miles a month between myself, Anthony, and David. I personally did 5,500 in December alone. We travel around a lot. We work 7 days a week, so our investors are based, as I said, in the Far East. That means you're doing calls at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's when they're awake. You've got to service their needs. So time, both input of our own time into it, but equally time in the sense of COVID and delays that you've had with this, hence building extra time. The second to be honest, there's no substitute for hard work with that in terms of how you overcome it. If you're having to do 7 days a week, you do 7 days a week. We've also started hiring more and more people to take on some of the other roles that you don't have to do. VAs are great. All ours are in-person staff. Matt is here with me tonight as my videographer. Thank you, Matt. So yeah, time and just general hard work. If you want to do a deal, no money down, you are going to have to take on more stress. You will. You're taking on risk inherently by taking a loan on, you're paying out 20%. The only reason you're doing that is because you're taking on the risk. You're delaying your need for money now to get paid later, and that's what they're doing as well. So there is going to be an added level of stress. You've got to be someone who can deal with the pressure. I got £3 million in loans and equity agreements from last year. That means I owe £3 million, not including the bank's money. Now, I walk around with a lot of debt on a daily basis, but I'm okay with it because I know how I'm going to pay it back in each and every situation. I know how to calculate when I'm going to be paying stuff back.
How's it get secured?
Multiple different ways, all the ways you would have thought of. Charges, restrictions, personal guarantees, and so on. Some are non-secured, pay a high interest rate, and the investors will find it. Oh yeah, with all those watches. You're going to take on that level of stress. You've got to understand how it works. But this is where you're going to be clear-headed, and you've got to think through your options before you sign on the deal. Before you sign the dotted line, just take a moment to think. It probably sounded great when you were going into it and you can do a deal with no money down. And it will be great, and you will be excited. But before you sign, can I pay this back? Can I genuinely pay this back? Because the downside on this stuff is big. Like, it's bankrupt big. It's like the end. You've got to make sure you know what you're doing when you're getting into this. So plan it through carefully, building contingency on cost. We technically need like 476 grand or something stupid like that. I got 500 because it gives me also an extra 20 grand float in the deal as well. Accounting for extra costs. Because if we get halfway through this deal, let's say we run out of money, let's say the bill cost runs over and the bank aren't willing to give us any more money. If I go back to my investor and ask for more money, how does that make me look given I told him how much the deal was going to cost? So you've got to build in extra cost contingencies with your deal. It's the same way dealing with a bank, but now you've got to look the person in the eye and tell them you cocked up. It's a little bit different. There's an added trust factor there. Especially when dealing with people overseas and they've transferred £500,000 on the back of a couple of phone calls with you. You may not even met them in person. And Zoom's great, but it's not the same as looking someone in the eye. Some of these investors will ask you 100 questions about the deal, stuff you never even thought about. People are going to ask questions. You've got to be okay with that. You've got to sit there, you've got to take it on the chin. Equally, it comes back to expectation management. I told the guy that this was going to take 2 years. I said the agreement will be for 3. Should take 2 years. They have full transparency about what's going on, but I'm managing expectations from the start to say, look, be prepared to leave your capital in for 3 years. You might not get it back tomorrow. Manage your expectations as you go through. Same with your relationships with your builders. Anyone who delivers projects knows you've got to manage expectations of builders too about what's going to happen and vice versa. Just being clear, being transparent and honest is probably the single biggest piece of advice I can give you when it comes to doing joint ventures. I see people all the time pitching stuff or selling stuff, and then you start getting to nitty gritty behind it and you find out there's 4 or 5 people in the chain. Or you find out that the tenants aren't actually going to move out, you haven't got vacant possession, they're just going to be relocated, but the tenancies are still active. There's a big difference between the two. There's a big legal problem behind that. Like, having genuine, clear transparency with people means the world. And if any of you were thinking of investing with someone, then you got the slight hint they were holding something back, immediately something going on in your head and you step back. You've got to be transparent. Even if I'm doing a loan agreement, let's say it was guaranteed, let's say they had a first charge, which basically means they're a bank in this situation, they can have your house off you if you default. They don't need to know what's going on with the deal. They don't even need to know what the deal is. The terms of the contract say that regardless of what happens, I pay you your money on this date with this interest, and if you don't, you get my house. Nice and simple. I still tell them what I'm putting the money in. I don't know, I'm thinking I'm going to spend it on a holiday. Damn nice holiday for £500,000 quid, but or a car. You know, you can get some nice cars for £500,000, but their liabilities, I go through the deal so they still know what's going on, because let's be honest, as much as they could repossess a house if you defaulted, you don't want to lose your house. They don't want to repossess it. They don't want to go through the hassle of it. They just want to get their money back. And you're going to use the money for the deal anyway, so the deal may as well be a good one. And what have you got to lose? I turn around and tell you the deal sucks and you go, oh, actually, you're right. You've just saved yourself a big headache by not going into a deal that doesn't work. But I'll have with you, man, the biggest problems I've had is straight up time and managing of expectations. No real major issues going through it. Stuff will come and go. You know, we had investors pull out 12 hours before completion. It sucks. You're on the phone on a Sunday trying to raise finances, speaking to people and build relationships, but that's part of the game. And to be honest, it's kind of part of the fun. You do need to be careful. You need to know where your limit of leverage is. You know, as I said, we've got to a point now where we know we could do another 2-3 projects, but we're just holding fire. We want to see how things progress over the next 3-4 months. We know COVID is likely to be a thing of the past. Nothing's guaranteed in life but death and taxes, as they would say. You know, so you've got to factor this kind of stuff in, and you just got to be clear-headed about what you're doing. But joint ventures for me are just the king of how things work. You have a problem, you can solve it with a joint venture. Awesome. I think that will be us for tonight. Thank you, guys.